Hey guys, we are the Null Operators, and this is video number 4 in our Learn to Code with Java web series. Today we're going to be covering arrays.
So up until this point, we've been dealing with variables in our code. And you can think of those as like boxes in memory, right? So if I created a couple of variables here, I could say that this is an integer. I could put a 10 in there, and I could say that this is a Boolean, and I could put a true in here, or something like that, right? Well, what if I wanted multiple values stored in one location? In that case, I could create an array. So an array, if you can think about it this way, is a bunch of values stored in sequence side by side that I can reference through one thing, right? So if I call this array ARR, I can reference each one of these boxes just by saying ARR at a specific box, tell me what that value is, or change that value to something, right? So if I said, for example, ARR at position 5 is going to equal 0, then we would go and we would change that box to be equal to 0, right? Well, there's one tricky thing with arrays in that the indexes start with 0 always. And you'll see that a lot in computer science is that you start from 0 instead of 1. So if we listed this out, you might be counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's actually position 4. So if we want to modify position 5, this is the box that we would be modifying. So let's see that in code so it can make a little bit more sense. So before we can get started working with arrays, we need to know how to declare them first, right? So we will create an integer, and I'll put these square brackets. These square brackets indicate that it's an array, and I'll call it ARR, and that's my declaration. Now these square brackets can either go next to the data type, or they can go after the name of your array. It's a matter of preference. I prefer having mine right here. So either way is fine. You'll just see me use this because it's my personal preference. So that's declaring one array, right? There's another way to declare it where I can declare and initialize it as well. So I'll call this array 1. This is uninitialized, right? So I'll put a comment here saying uninitialized. And then if I wanted to actually initialize this one, I could say new int size 10. So this is saying my array2 is going to be an array of size 10. And it's not going to have anything but default values in it at first. With integer arrays, every box in there defaults to a 0. Based on your data type, you'll get a different default value. So this is going to be an array of size 10 full of zeros, but it'll be initialized at least. Now there's another way to declare and initialize this. So if we have our array3, we can just manually pass in the value. So we do that by opening up some curly braces here. And I can just say like 3, 5, 7, 9, 2. So what that's going to do is it's going to count these things. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. So it knows that the array is going to be size 5, and it's going to put these things in the correct boxes. So box 0 will have 3, box 1 will have 5, 2, 7, 3, 9, 4, 2, etc. So those are the 3 different ways that you can initialize these with manual values, we'll call that. And we can test this by then going through and printing out all the values in the array. So if I wanted to, I could just say, print out position 1, 2, 3. I could say this out array 2 at 0, and then do the same thing over and over again, right? But that kind of defeats the purpose of arrays, right? I don't want to have to do this printing out each individual box. So the reason arrays are pretty powerful is that we can use a loop to step through the array and do something to each box. In this case, print out the value in each box, right? So if I go here, let's do our for loop condition. So like we covered before in our previous video, the way that I'm going to create a for loop is I declare some variable up here. I'll call it I. I'm going to start it off at 0 because I want to go from position 0 in the array to the end of the array, right? So you might be asking, am I just going to put a 10 here? How am I going to know, right? Like this array here, array 3 is size 5. This one is size 10. So is there a better way to do this? Yes, there is. With arrays, they have a built-in property that basically allows you to retrieve however long they are. So I could say array2.length, and that's going to give me however long this array is. So if I decide later on in my program that I want to change this and then instead say that maybe it's like size 6 now, I don't have to change this loop because it adapts to it no matter what. It's always going to get the correct length because of this .length property. So you'll see that all the time. Get used to seeing it, get used to using it, because this is pretty standard when you're dealing with arrays. So we're going to want to print out whatever is at array2 at position I with a space. So in order to get the value from that array, I have the name of the array, some square brackets, and then the index that I want to get the value from. So name of the array at a certain position represents a value. Sometimes you'll see people just put I here, right? So they'll just put the index. That's incorrect. That's going to give me a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 instead of the 3, 5, 7, 9, 2, right? I want to get the actual values from this array. So I do that with the name of the array, square brackets, the position that I want to access. So I'll just duplicate this for my second array. Do this for array 3. And I'll have a little print line beforehand telling me which array I'm dealing with. So we'll say array 2. And this one will be array 3. So if we run this now, we'll see that our first array, I should probably have a print line here, put a \n and run that again. So we'll get our array 2 is full of 0 values, and it's size 6, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they get the default values, which for integers is zeros. Array 3 is going to be size 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the values are going to be the thing that we passed in. So again, get used to seeing these loops, get used to declaring these, because these are very useful and you'll see them used all the time. And you might be thinking, well, why didn't you do anything with array 1? Well, let's show you why. So let's say I try to print out array 1 at 0, right? And I'll just get rid of these for now. So if we try to do that, it's going to give me an error saying it's not initialized. So just like a variable, right? If I said int a, if I could type, if I just say int a semicolon, I can't do anything with a. It doesn't have a value. I can only print something out if it exists, right? So even though this is declared, if it doesn't have a value, I can't print it out. It's the same thing with the array. This array was declared, but I don't know how big it is. I don't know what values it contains, so I can't do anything until I actually initialize it in one of these two ways. So let's do a little bit more practice here. Say we wanted to, I don't need this. Say we wanted to get the size from the user and fill it in with values from the user, right? One, I'll need to import my scanner. So that's what this import statement up here is doing. And then I'll create my scanner. So now I'll create my array, but I won't initialize it. So I'll just leave it like this. I'll just say there's an array called ARR. It exists, but I haven't done anything with it yet. So then we'll give the user a message saying, please enter the size of the array. And then we'll create our for loop. Actually, we're not going to create our for loop yet. Instead, we're going to say int size equals scan.next int. So we'll get the size from the user, and now we can use that size to initialize our array. So I'll say ARR equals a new integer array of size. So whatever size the user gave me, I'll create the array to be that size, and then I can create my loop to step through and add in all the values. So I can say int I equals 0, I is less than arr.length. And again, you'll see why this is so useful, right? Because I don't know what size they gave me. They could have given me anything. They could have given me 10, 15, 1,000, a million, right? So this arr.length is going to adapt to whatever they gave me, and this will always step through each one of the boxes. So in here, let's have another print statement beforehand saying enter the values for the array. Right? And we'll separate this because they're kind of different blocks. And so then we can just say array at I is equal to scan.nextInt. So just like before with variables, right? This represents kind of like a variable, right? The position in this array at box I needs to equal some value, right? So if I wanted to print it out like before, I would use array at I. If I want to assign a value, I would use array at I or whatever index. So make sure that you're knowing when to use this and what it needs, right? I need the name of the array and the position is equal to some value. So now we can have another print statement saying you entered and then in here we'll do the exact same thing that we did before where we just print out the value in each index. And we want them all in the same line, so we will not make this a print line. We'll just make it a regular print, and we'll put a space between all of them. In fact, I'm going to do something a little bit extra here. So we went over if statements and switch statements before, right? Selection structures. Let's say I wanted to put a comma after each one of these things. We'll see an issue pops up whenever we run this. So I'm going to enter size 5 for my array, and I'll say that it contains 3, 5, 7, 2, 6. So this works, right? I get a comma between all my elements, but then I get a comma at the very end. So to clean this up, I can use an if statement. I can say if, let's see, I is less than array.length minus 1, then I'll do this. Otherwise, I'll do the same thing, but instead without the comma. And so whenever we run this, I'll do the same thing. We'll do an array of size 8 this time, and I'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we get the commas in between, but no comma at the end. So just trying to refresh you on the stuff we covered before. Those if-else statements can be useful dealing with arrays as well if you want to format your output to look a little bit cleaner. So this is kind of the standard for how we would use an array, how we would declare an array, that kind of thing. Let's talk about some traps and pitfalls. One of the most common things you'll see when you're dealing with arrays, whenever you get an error, is called an index out of bounds error. So for example, if I said that down here, I wanted to print out from -1 to array.length, right? So I'll make it a small array. I'll say it's size 3 and it's got 1, 2, 3 in it. We get an index out of bounds because we talked about how arrays always start at index 0. They're index 0 to whatever size the array is, right? I can't access array at -1 because there is no array at -1. So I get this error that's telling me I can't access index -1. It's out of bounds. It's not a part of that array. So that'll happen on either end, right? If I had a 0 here or a -1 here, that would happen. If I had less than or equal to array.length here instead of less than, if I had less than or equal to, I'd also get the same issue. And this one's a little bit trickier because you have to think a little bit. So if I had 3 with 1, 2, 3, we're going to get another index out of bounds because an array of size 3, right? 1, 2, 3 is index 0, 1, 2. So the length is 3, right? But there is no index 3. There's only index 0, 1, and 2. So the size of the array is always going to be 1 bigger than the last index of the array. So you need to make sure you keep that in mind, because if you're trying to access an array at the lengths of the array, at the index that's the size of the array, you're going to get an index out of bounds error because that doesn't exist. It goes to 1 less than however big the array is. Now, besides that, a common thing that I see is when dealing with array assignment or printing out array values or something like that, kind of to reinforce this, it's supposed to look like array at 5 is equal to something, right? An array at an index is equal to some new value. A lot of times people try to say array equals 6 or print out array, right? This just doesn't work at all here. It'll just throw an error to me because I need to know where in the array I'm modifying, right? This is a sequence of values. It's not just one value, so I can't say array equals this thing. So get rid of that. And then if I try to print this out, let's get rid of all of this other stuff. I'll create an empty print line here just to put me down on the next line. So whenever I run this, we'll do our 3, 1, 2, 3. And whoops, we need to get rid of this line here because our array is size 3 now, so there's no index 5. But now we can go ahead and run it again, and we'll get what I'm trying to get you at. So if we go 3, 1, 2, 3, we get this weird thing here, right? What is that? Whenever I try to print out array, instead of getting all the values for the array, I get this crazy thing. What this is the memory address for the array. So whenever you're dealing with objects, arrays are actually objects. Whenever you try to print out an object, by default, it gives you the memory address for that object. And we'll delve into that a little bit deeper when we get to classes and objects and toString methods. But for now, just know that I can't print out the array by just typing its name. I have to have a loop that steps through each element and prints out each element, right? So going back to what we did before, we would have to I can do things, I swear. So we'll go from I equals 0, I is less than array.length, I plus plus, and so we'll print out each element of the array by saying array at I plus a space. And so if we do that, I'll say size 4 this time, and we'll go 4, 3, 2, 1, and it spits it back out to me in the values that were entered. So that's the basics of arrays. Mess around with them, try and break them, see how they work and get comfortable using them because they're very common in computer science. But that'll be it for this video. Please remember to like, subscribe, click the bell notification icon. It helps us a lot. And in the next video, we'll be covering methods.